alone. I have a guess.
I mean, mine is gonna be probably a little bit more shallow, but I think I got a guess too.
Mine's the opposite. I have a fear of like open water.
Star of West Side Story was cast as Snow White. It garnered even greater popularity. Although there were differing opinions among fans over this casting decision, Zegler's remarks on the characteristics of her Snow White version appeared to spark the main debate. Zegler stressed in many interviews that this was a contemporary rendition of the traditional fairy tale, moving away from the romanticism and prince-centered 1937 animated version. Zegler claims that this interpretation of the character is more about leadership and self-empowerment, which has sparked strong feelings on the internet. Zegler was quite clear that this Snow White would not be hoping for a prince to rescue her or dreaming of true love. She is, on the other hand, dreaming of becoming the leader she knows she can be. The role is being recast as a strong, independent woman who reflects the ways that female characters are presented in contemporary movies are evolving. While some viewers find resonance in these changes, others thought it was superfluous to stray from the traditional romantic trope. Many people associate the original Snow White with an enduring tale of purity and unchanging love, one in which she finds contentment and happiness via love. Despite receiving little attention in the beloved animated film, Snow White's romance with Prince Charming is, after all, the main focus of the traditional tale. The live-action adaptation of the story is expected to have a somewhat lower role for the prince, who has been criticized for being a very passive and even stalkerish character in the original. In interviews, especially one with Variety, Zegler made remarks that directly targeted the prince's character, saying that in the first film, he practically pursues Snow White. She also questioned the narrative for its antiquated focus on pure love triumphing over evil. These words led to an instant surge of criticism. Zegler's rendition of the 1937 movie, which is regarded as one of Disney's most treasured masterpieces, was criticized by some for being disrespectful to its heritage. For them, Snow White represents not only a romantic tale, but also an important period in animation history that helped shape Disney's enduring narrative. The film is also seen as a product of its day, capturing the cultural ideals of the 1930s, which some contend ought to be appreciated rather than dissected. Zegler's statement about seeing women torn down throughout her life was what really polarized the interview. Critics saw her comments as implicitly blaming viewers of sexism or misogyny for rejecting this contemporary version of Snow White, which infuriated even more people. Some people saw Zegler's position, which explained the outcry as a result of women being unjustly maligned in society as a whole, to be condescending toward legitimate worries about the route Disney was headed with its classic tales. Many accused her of needlessly politicizing the character and the plot, which sparked contentious arguments. Zegler has been likened to other actresses who have seen comparable backlash for remarks they made about updated versions of famous characters, which has only served to fan the flames. For example, comparable reactions were generated by Brie Larson's remarks on female empowerment during the Captain Marvel press tour. Some fans of these actresses believe that their comments about their roles are alienating others who value the more conventional elements of these tales. The Snow White dispute is really a microcosm of a much bigger cultural conversation about gender roles in media and how to reconcile contemporary ideals with reverence for ancient literature. Disney has been progressively introducing feminist themes into their movies, but some people feel that this is a reworking of well-loved tales for the purpose of political correctness. Some fans have praised Zegler in the face of criticism, applauding her for standing up for a confident, powerful version of Snow White. They contend that this updated version of the figure allows young girls to see themselves as capable of realizing their ambitions. But in the realm of live-action remakes nowadays, Zegler's remarks are not unique. Disney has begun to recast its female characters as more self-reliant and capable of controlling their own paths. Other recent remakes like Aladdin and Mulan, where female characters were given more agency and less reliance on male love interests or saviors, reflect this change. Although many reviewers have praised Disney for its progressive views on gender roles, Traditionalists and aficionados of the original tales have opposed these developments without the need for romance and is more in line with contemporary social standards. In the end, the controversy surrounding Snow White and Rachel Zegler's interpretation of the role brings to light a conflict between appreciating the past and looking to the future. These debates are probably going to endure as long as there are remakes published, particularly because Disney wants to honor the heritage of the originals while bringing its cherished characters up to date for a new generation. When the movie opens, only time will tell if Zegler's Snow White becomes a new fan favorite or continues to be a contentious issue. However, one thing is for sure, it has already started a crucial discussion about gender, representation, and narrative in contemporary film. First, Zegler made the argument that the criticism and denigration of women in the public spotlight is a major contributing factor to the anger she is receiving for her depiction of Snow White. Zegler said in an interview that she was disappointed in the way her remarks were interpreted, saying, "To be honest, I was saddened that it was interpreted that way, because I think women are capable of anything, but I also think they are capable of everything." This phrase seems to express both her dissatisfaction with how others interpreted her understanding of the character and her faith in women's capacity to juggle several roles and goals. Zegler's comments on women receiving unfair criticism provoked a swift and forceful response. She received a lot of support for speaking up for herself and drawing attention to the unfair treatment that women in Hollywood sometimes endure. They emphasized that female performers often experience a degree of scrutiny and hatred that their male colleagues seldom ever experience, especially when they are playing remade versions of legendary roles. Some fans contend that Zegler's Snow White is unjustly targeted because she deviates from the classic version of the character, and they see the criticism as a sign of more significant gender-related problems in society. However, not everyone agreed with Zegler's position. The idea that the reaction was primarily motivated by gender was quickly refuted by critics. Many said that their issues with the new Snow White were more related to the filmmaker's particular approach in telling the narrative than they were to Zegler's gender. These critics, who identify as lovers of the original 1937 animated picture, contend that they are offended by the character's alleged modernization and by the departure from the traditional features of fairy tales, particularly the emphasis on romance. They believe that the current version of Snow White has removed the character of her essential identity since, to them, the character has always been about the main love narrative. As a second area of controversy emerged, the friction between Zegler's justification of her depiction and the fan criticism became increasingly evident. Zegler had stated in an earlier interview that the new Snow White would not be romantic. She said how the original prince from the 1937 movie literally stalks her, and said that the new Snow White would dream of being a leader rather than true love. Zegler said that Snow White's goals and independence were the main emphasis, not a prince or a love connection. Critics of Zegler's most recent statements also referred to her past interviews as proof of inconsistencies. They stressed that she had made it clear in those interviews that this Snow White would change greatly. With Rachel Zegler's recent remarks in an interview, the continuing debate surrounding Disney's live-action Snow White adaptation has taken a new turn. Zegler, who was chosen to play Snow White, has been at the heart of this contentious discussion from the start. The conversation that started out as only about how she interpreted the iconic character has now expanded to include gender roles and how women are portrayed in the media. Zegler's latest comments have revived these conversations, with two specific sentences provoking major controversy among audiences. From the 1937 adaptation, portraying it as a more feminist reworking that strayed from the conventional love tale. Many fans were misled and disillusioned by Zegler's recent remarks, which seemed to be a retreat in reaction to the public anger and hinted at a possible relationship. It's always going to be difficult to reimagine legendary figures like Snow White, and it seems obvious that Disney's decision to update the character has struck a chord. The controversy over Zegler's performance and remarks is representative of larger conversations in the entertainment industry, especially those about how to adapt well-loved tales for contemporary audiences without sacrificing their original charm. There are others who argue that these timeless stories need to change to better represent modern ideals, especially in regards to how women, independence, and leadership are portrayed. Traditionalists, on the other hand, believe that these tales should stay loyal to their original form and consider any alterations made to major story components, perhaps such as the romance, to be superfluous or even detrimental to the movie's legacy. In the end, there isn't a clear end to the dispute surrounding Zegler's portrayal of Snow White. It won't be known until the movie is out whether or not her portrayal of the character will be well received by viewers. Zegler's remarks have, however, made one thing quite evident. This Snow White will not be the meek, infatuated princess of the 1930s. Rather, she will be a representation of the nuanced and changing standards that the media of the 21st century places on women. Whichever side of the argument you are on will determine whether or not it is a beneficial thing. Get rid of any rumors. When a young woman is cast in a prominent role, it seems that there will always be people who want to bring her down. To better understand this, let's examine previous Disney live-action adaptations that have mostly featured female leads. For example, the 2015 remake of Cinderella generated little controversy, and the lead actress had a generally positive experience while marketing and filming the movie. Moving beyond Disney, we can examine the 2021 Cinderella film starring Camila Cabello. Cabello, like Rachel Zegler, is of Hispanic descent, but she received far less criticism for the film than Zegler did. In fact, James Corden received more criticism than Cabello did for the 2019 live-action Beauty and the Beast. Emma Watson faced almost no criticism, at least not as much as Zegler. Next, we may look at the more contemporary version of The Little Mermaid, which generated a lot of discussion. But throughout her career thus far, Bailey has undoubtedly faced criticism for her portrayal of a historically white character in The Little Mermaid. You can argue them, however, Zegler seems to take a somewhat different stand in her most recent interview. Despite Snow White's desire for romance, she still has other goals and objectives. So maybe romance will feature in the movie after all, she hinted. A fresh round of online criticism was swiftly sparked by this seeming inconsistency, with many admirers accusing Zegler of retracting her earlier remarks. While some believed that Zegler's inconsistent remarks demonstrated a jumbled or ill-considered narrative about the film's message, others conjectured that reshoots or changes in direction may have brought back more conventional romance themes. Merits of that argument all day, but most people's issues were with Bailey's casting, not with her, because she gave them no reason to. In interviews and press junkets, Bailey generally came across as likable and charming, just another actress going about her business. Thrilled to be taking on such a big role, she didn't feel the need to respond angrily to her critics. Instead, she didn't act as though she was entitled to even more than she already had, nor did she disparage her own co-stars. This was a very wise move on her part because she mostly avoided the controversy that surrounded the film. And today, most people seem to be sympathetic toward her. Conversely, Rachel Zegler began her career in much the same way, but ultimately took a very different route. By comparing the responses to
in San Juan Hill during this time period, they brought in historians to speak to us. They even brought in
personal remarks rather than just her gender. While some people may attack her because of her gender, this does not seem to be the main issue. In fact, some feminist groups have voiced their disapproval of her. So what specifically has sparked such intense criticism? Opposition against her. As I mentioned earlier, in a country like the US, she is entitled to her opinions, but expressing them inevitably invites criticism. This dynamic is likely what is causing the vocal backlash. It appears that the core of the problem lies in her strong opinions. She has every right to express her views, but when someone holds firm beliefs, it can be inherently divisive. So some people will resonate with her perspective, while others will vehemently oppose it. Has fueled the criticism of Rachel Zegler that we're seeing today. claiming that it's just because she's a woman and that she doesn't address the fundamental problems that seem to be the result of her strong beliefs. When we beyond Disney films, there are many examples of young, gifted female actresses being accepted and honored by the public. Jenna Ortega is one such example. Anna Taylor-Delight and Dia and Sydney Sweeney, for example, demonstrate that the story may alter based on your viewpoint. In these circumstances, many young women are being praised rather than condemned, even if I don't want to discount the possibility that there are people who may betray. The complexity of the situation is far too new to rely on such a general statement. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that life is rarely black and white, but rather is full of shades of gray. So sweeping generalizations typically fall short of capturing the true essence of the issue in the end. Targeting someone based solely on their gender doesn't seem to represent the majority of opinions at this time. Exist to satisfy the needs of the audience, and the movie's final rating